You're listening to Mammalwatching with Charles Foley and John Hall. You can find other episodes at mammalwatching.com/podcast.
And we're back with the second part of our interview with the extraordinary George Schaller. Over to you, Charles.
George, you helped set up the huge Changtang Nature Reserve in Tibet. And when you were there, you studied the migration of the chiru, or Tibetan antelope, which has to be one of the most beautiful antelopes on the planet, in my opinion. And at that point was estimated to have a population of around 1 million animals. Can you tell our listeners a bit about the antelope, what it looks like, and also what you discovered about its movement patterns?
Well, it's one of these situations. The Tibet Plateau did not have much work. There were Chinese expeditions up there collecting a little data, but the Tibetan antelope migrates quite a bit. And yes, you can see a herd of 5, 6, even 10,000 as they're migrating.
Wow.
The females migrate north into uninhabited areas and have their babies. The males move around here and there, and nobody really knew exactly where they went and so forth. So one of my tasks in my Chinese team, everything I do is done with local teams, because that's one purpose of my being in the country, is to learn from them, and they can learn from my techniques, and then we can share information and present it to the government together. Anyway, we followed migration routes of these animals. A lot of it could be done by car, because at that high elevation at 15,000 feet, there's not even any brush much, and you drive across country and the ground is frozen, except where it's melted, and you get stuck and have to dig all day. But these Tibetan antelope are beautiful. The males with long horns, again, a couple of foot long horns. The animal is black and white. The females are tan-colored. And their problem is they have the finest wool in the world. The underwool is short, but it's so soft in diameter that most weavers can't weave it. But in Kashmir in India, they've learned to weave it years ago, because the wool was used to make shawls for the royal family and so forth. And then suddenly, when things opened up a little bit between Tibet and India, these animals were shot by the thousands. Whole teams of jeeps will go across the high plateau, killing the Tibetan antelope, or chiru. And that was extremely sad to see. And nobody really knew what was going on. Well, I saw quite a bit what was going on. I saw the camps I went to, and there'd be a tent with a couple of Tibetan hunters with 20, 30 dead antelope. Well, I alerted the officials to this, and they said, look, we've got to publicize this. They'll take care of it in this country, but you go overseas, you go out of China, and you tell what is happening, and this must stop. So that's what I did. And soon the European countries prohibited the import of this wool and the shawls. And the last one to do so was Switzerland. And finally, India as well as prohibited it. But smuggling still goes on into India because there are weavers in Kashmir that know how to handle it, very fine, short wool to make shawls. And now Europe, it's unfashionable to wear those shawls. And it is beautiful, soft wool. It really is. But the ones that are now buying these shawls are the Arabs, Saudi Arabia. They suddenly found that this is a nice little shawl to have. So it's a constant battle to protect the species. Now, I've gone back to Tibet Plateau. Nobody knows how many antelope there are. The only way to probably get a reasonably solid count is to have an airplane to go census and photograph them from the air. But at least two populations that I was able to check in recent years have increased because China has been determined, and it sent out anti-poaching patrols that confiscated vehicles of poachers and so forth. So I'm, again, hopeful.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's good news.
It is some good news. So can we keep talking about China, because it can be such a paradox, at least from the outside. You've spent 40 years there. You talk about the commitment that your Chinese colleagues have had to protecting the chiru and the panda and other things, and yet at the same time, this massive country with the rapidly growing middle class is driving a huge trade in wildlife for things like Chinese traditional medicine. Where do you see this going? Are you optimistic about the future and this changing, this demand changing, and how can we help, or how can people help?
Yes, it's a very awkward problem. I think the change will be slow. You have to prohibit the sale of any of these medicines that contain this material. And it's very difficult to stop from coming into the country. After all, China borders, how many countries? About 10. And they all make money by exporting things to China. And so it's a very difficult one that I don't know quite how to solve. But the Chinese government knows very well to stop, for example, the illegal import of elephant ivory from Africa. They confiscated a huge pile, quite a few tons, and set it on fire publicly. That had a worldwide impact, seeing all those elephant tusks burning up. Yes, rhino horn is difficult. They're still being poached for use in China. And but what I do when I see something that I think needs attention in China, I mention it to local officials and say, now this is what you could do, etc. But I don't shout about it internationally unless they ask me to. Because I've been very, very fortunate in that they let me work with their teams and remote and what they consider sensitive areas to get basic information about wildlife and conservation. And the only thing that has kept me home now for well over a year is a pandemic. You can't travel anymore. And that's a real worry to me also, because a lot of these villages in different parts of the world, they've made money from tourists, showing snow leopards in Ladakh to tourists. In Brazil, a lot of them in Pantanal swamps, they had jaguars habituated so tourists could go within 20 feet of them and photograph them. And all this money is going to be lost if they stop protecting the wildlife. And that really worries me, because that's the one thing some of that wildlife can do, is help the local people make money.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. I was actually just last week, a week today, I was in Windy doing my bit to paying with my children to see the gorillas. And things were obviously very slow there last year, but business has really picked up again, and the gorillas are doing fine. So that's one thing perhaps we don't need to worry about, but there's many, many other examples, like you say.
George, one question I've always wanted to ask you is, so you've worked extensively in mountainous areas as well as the tropics and also the high deserts in Mongolia, for instance. And I was wondering if you have a preference for where you work. And perhaps I should preface this by saying that in my mind, I generally associate you with high mountains. And perhaps that's because of that iconic photograph that you took of a female snow leopard in Pakistan in 1970, which was one of the first, if not the first, photograph of the species in the wild. And it shows a female snow leopard that you've been watching for 2 days on a kill, and she's crouching down and she's staring at you with her gray eyes and just blending wonderfully into the background of rock and snow. And there's something about that picture which, to me, just epitomizes wild animals in wild places. And I used to stare at that photograph when I was a teenager, just wishing that one day I could see a snow leopard. So to get back to my question, do you have a preference for where you work? And do you feel more exhilarated in one ecosystem over another?
Well, since you mentioned that snow leopard female, she was wonderful. She had a cub in a nearby cave, and I stayed with her nearly a week. She'd sit there. I put down my sleeping bag on the hillside and sleep the night there, and then see her in the morning. It was a wonderful experience. But I like mountains in part because of the feeling of freedom. You have this vast view. You can see, I can look at wild yak on a hillside 2 miles away. So I like the Rome Mountains, whereas you go into the rainforest, it's exceptional, but I look around and I can't identify much. You have 100 species of trees and a couple of acres. And you don't see much wildlife, and if there's a bird, it's 100 feet above you. So I don't feel the emotional attachment to the rainforest that I do to the wildlife of the high mountains.
Yeah.
And, no matter what reasons you give for studying something, it's the enjoyment, the emotional attachment that in the end what really counts. Because that's when you get truly involved in something.
Indeed. I just have a quick question. your stories are full of these incredible encounters with animals like snow leopards and pandas and gorillas, potentially dangerous animals. Have you ever been in a position where you were scared, or did something put yourself in danger, or has it always been, kind, as you say, you're kind to the animals and they're gentle in return?
Oh, when you wander around, you get into situations. I remember, well, when I was working on tigers in India, again, I tend to wear the same color clothes every day. The tigers can see me. If they see me, oh, there's this guy again. So they often just lay down and watch me pass, and I very carefully did not look at them so they don't feel threatened by a human stare. But one time I leaned against the rock, and the tiger happened to be sleeping on it that I didn't see. So tiger woke up, and there was this human head about 4 feet from him. He gave a big roar. Well, it made me nervous. I backed off. The thing is, I don't carry a gun, so it doesn't give me a tension, an aggressive tension that you always would have if you carried a gun. So it's better to, like with a gorilla, you wave your head from side to side to show no aggressive intention, and the gorilla knows it. And you meet a big brown bear in Alaska, the best thing to do is back off slowly, don't run. And so I've been very lucky. I've never been attacked, although a gorilla may come roaring up and swat the vegetation, but that's a threat.
Wow, it's just extraordinary to meet a tiger on foot and all those things. It's really, really fascinating.
Yeah, but you're pretty safe with squirrels.
You haven't seen the ones around here, I tell you. So a lot of the species that you first worked on have now, as you've mentioned, become big tourist attractions, jaguars and snow leopards and mountain gorillas. But what are your thoughts about mammal watchers like us, or wildlife tourism more generally? Obviously, there are financial benefits for the local community, but it can also bring problems by bringing all these people into remote areas. So what do you think of it? What's the bottom line? Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it has to be regulated. For example, in India, I've seen vehicles drive 10 feet behind a tiger that's walking. All right, that shouldn't be allowed, because there have been a couple instances where the tiger got annoyed and jumped right into the Jeep and started swatting around. The thing is, that has to be controlled. But I'm all for it. But the important thing, I feel, is that the money, or a good percent of the money that's made from this wildlife tourism in an area, is given to the local communities so they help protect the wildlife. And that way, it's reciprocal. The tourists enjoy it, the local people make a benefit. And so far, in most places, that money simply vanishes, and as a result, the local people invade the protected areas, they kill the wildlife, and so forth. And that's not necessary if you do it.
Yeah, I think that's something we should all ask and talk about and inquire about before we visit somewhere, to see if that money that's being spent actually does get to the local people. As you say, it's extremely important, and it doesn't happen often enough. The last question from me: are there any mammal species that you haven't seen in the wild that you would love to see?
Well, some of the species that are would love to see is the mammoths, giant ground sloths, and others that vanished some
Tricky. Yeah.
centuries ago. But no, what I like to do is go back to areas that I've worked in and see what is the progress with the wildlife, how can one help, or should one help the communities now, and so forth. So, like, I want to get back to the Amazon rainforest as soon as it's safe from the pandemic again. And because that's being destroyed at a fantastic rate. 2, 3, 4,000 square miles a year are cut down. And that has an impact on you because the rainforest absorbs about a quarter of the world's carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, global warming. And it releases a tremendous amount of transpiration from the big trees, so you get a lot of rain. Cut the rainforest, you'll get desert. And all you have to do is look at what's happening in the Brazil rainforest. And all these big areas, a road comes in, a lot of settlers come in, cut the forest, grow crops for 2 or 3 years, the soil is exhausted, and that's that. And that's tragic for just not Brazil and this adjoining country, but for humankind. And so I'd like to get back there. I'd like to get back to Iran because the last Asiatic cheetahs, maybe 50, maybe 40, are now in Iran. They've been wiped out everywhere where they used to exist, from the Mediterranean into India. And what is so sad is, well, the last time I was there was 2016. 2 years later, the government arrested all the biologists that were involved in wildlife studies there, about a dozen of them, because they were criticizing the government because the government was moving into national parks to drill for oil. So these two guys are in jail since 2018. They have not yet been released, even though they did absolutely nothing. So I worry about the last cheetahs as well as my colleagues over there.
Yeah, it's a terrible situation, that one.
Yeah.
George, over the years, you have had amazing wildlife experiences. The sort of experiences that few people have ever had. You've seen things that other people just haven't seen, and now may never see again. And I know this is a little unfair, but do you have one or two favorite experiences from all those years that you spent in the wild that really stand out to you that you'd like to share with us?
Well, as I mentioned, being accepted by mountain gorillas back in 1960, or animals sleeping next to me, or climbing, sitting on a branch with me. And they are our close relations, and they're beautiful. So that kind of thing very much stays with me. But other than I might mention, I've been extremely fortunate. I have a wife, Kay, that's been with me over 6 decades, raised our 2 sons, living in Tanzania, living in Pakistan, traveling with me all over the place and helping in every respect. So I have my own little pride of lions that help me. and cooperated with me.
And obviously, we've already sort of mentioned this. COVID has played havoc on people's research plans and travel plans generally over the past year. But one day it'll end. And when that does happen, what are your work plans for the future?
I will see what happens. My immediate concern is to check on the Amazon in Brazil because it's being destroyed so fast. If you look on a map, there are all these beautiful areas that are marked as national parks, reserves, and so forth, some of them several thousand square miles in size. But you go there are people cutting it down for fields, local people hunting out the concept of empty forest, where you can walk for hours and don't see any sign of a large mammal, not even a monkey, is true for a lot of these areas. And there's no staff. Some of them have good staff, but they have no power to do anything. And so I get so frustrated to see these beautiful areas and these dedicated local people that want to do something, and the government does not support them. And sometimes when I visited an area, just the very fact that a foreigner shows up and expresses concern does help locally.
Right. And one final question. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience? Any other stories, any other information that you'd like to impart?
I think everybody, and I mean everybody, needs to be involved in being concerned about the future of this planet. I'm not just talking about conservation. All you have to do is look at climate change. And I go back to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which I've done 5 times between 1952 and 2008. You go back after 50 years, the glaciers are melting. The brush is creeping up the slopes. The permanently frozen ground is melting, which will change the whole vegetation. Recently, there have been big fires on the tundra up there because they've dried out so. So the environment is drastically changes for the worse. And what is so sad is that 30 years ago, the governments were warned about climate change and the potential impact. But they just said, oh, well, let's not worry about it now. And it's far cheaper to prevent some environmental damage than to clean it up afterwards. And now it's getting to be impossible to realize that the government has now, the UN has issued what they call Code Red Alert for the planet, that there's no going back. The climate change is going to get worse. There are going to be more serious floods in China and India. There are going to be more huge forest fires in the United States and in Greece or whatever. Sea levels will rise, maybe 10 feet or more. And just think of what happens to people that live on the coast. Well, all that's going to happen. But people seem to shrug their shoulders and go on. And that includes high-level officials. So people really need to think about protecting the environment, knowing who you vote for. in countries where you vote. And I mean, countries learn this only afterwards. Look at the previous US president. Look at the current one in Brazil. Oh, anyway, so everybody has to be involved. This is not something for a few scientists or whatever.
Yes, it's all very sobering, isn't it? And it was just yesterday that the latest IPCC report was circulated, and it makes fairly dire reading, I must admit.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, George Schaller, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for coming on the program and sharing some of your insights and stories with us.
Yes, but thank you again also from me. It's an absolutely inspirational story of a life that you've done so much. You're still, I think, 88, going strong and traveling to places that many people a quarter of your age would worry about going to. And you've also achieved so much and done such a huge impact on leaving the planet better than when you found it. So thank you very much from me. It's been a real privilege.
Well, thank you for your kind words and all success with your program.
Thank you, George.
Thanks.
What an amazing story. What an amazing life. If you'd like to read more about George Schaller, then please check out some of the links that we put in the notes for this podcast, or of course, just turn to Google. In the next episode, we'll be interviewing two mammal watchers, Venkat and Harry Sanker, who've just got back from a record-breaking trip around Kenya where they clocked up over 120 species. And also a reminder, you can write to Charles, Jose and me by emailing mammalwatching@gmail.com.
You've been listening to Mammalwatching with Charles Foley and John Hall. You can find other episodes at mammalwatching.com/podcast.